Scalpel, check. Rooting powder, check. Pokey thing, check. Bring in the donor. So despite the opening, what we're doing today is not brain surgery. I'm going to show you today how to take cuttings from dahlias. The main reason to take cuttings from dahlias is to increase your stock. It's as simple as that. You can certainly divide your tuber clumps into smaller tubers, but you can get a lot more cuttings from a single tuber than you will just by dividing a clump of tubers. So I don't do a lot of this, and I certainly don't do it with all my dahlias because I simply don't need that many dahlias. But there are times when you want to make sure you have extras on hand. And for instance, this year, that's me. I'm doing a couple other projects in other places, and I want to make sure that I've got some of one of my favorite kind of go-to dahlias, HS Date, to put into those gardens if I need them. And I certainly don't have enough tubers to supply my own garden and a bunch of other gardens as well. So that's where cuttings come in handy. I started this process about 3 weeks ago, but trust me, there's plenty of time left to do this. I just started early so I could show you the whole process in one video. Basically what you want to do is take some tubers out of storage, divide your clumps into either single tubers or a couple of tubers. I rarely go down to single tubers, but you certainly can. But you don't want big clumps of it because it's simply not needed for this process. Then I just plant them up in regular potting mix. Now I used a dish drain tub with holes drilled in the bottom of it that I picked up at the hardware store. And I did that because while you can lay them flat in like a regular 10 by 20 tray, this way you can actually plant them straight, more or less, straight up and down. So by having this deeper tub, I was able to fill this up higher. I was able to fit more dahlias in each one of these tubs. I have 2 going, and basically plant them straight up and down. When you pot them up, you want to leave their necks sticking out because that is where the eyes are going to develop into sprouts. And so that's where you'll be taking your cuttings from. You make sure that the soil is sort of, can you wring it out? Get it damp enough that you wring it out and like a little bit of water comes out, but not a ton. You don't want it soaking wet. And that's all you have to do. Pop it on a heat mat. You don't need light until they start sprouting, but then you definitely do need light on top of it after that. So how long it takes to get from potting them up to being able to take cuttings from them depends a lot on your tubers and sort of how dormant they are. HS Date is like just the most agreeable dahlia in the world because it always is ready for anything, and it just shot right up almost immediately. I also have some Waltzing Matilda in here, and in the other tub that I'm doing, I have some Crichton Honey. Both of those are just now starting to sprout. So the timing on how long it might take depends a little bit on probably the individual variety, how dormant they are, how they've been stored. There's probably a whole bunch of factors, but don't be surprised if it takes a little bit longer or a little bit shorter from dahlia to dahlia. The time to take your cuttings is when they have 2, maybe 3 sets of leaves on them. I don't like them to get a lot bigger than that. I figure the longer they're attached to that tuber, the more energy they are drawing from that tuber. And I'm going to keep coming back to these tubers for a couple of rounds of cuttings. They say you should do a maximum of about 4 or 5 cuttings per tuber because otherwise you sort of deplete all the energy that's in it. And then you can actually plant that tuber and continue growing it on. When you're ready to take your cuttings, the next thing you need is something to put your cuttings into. Now, what I bought here, this is called the Root Riot. And this is just simply, this comes as a set. And that honestly, I bought it because it was a set. It seemed really easy. It's a simple 10 by 20 tray. It's a cell tray, a square cell tray with 50 cells in it. And what's in these cells are these little sort of spongy, like, I don't even know what these are. They're sort of like sponges. These are, I think, just a different shape of the part of the little sponges that come with the Park Seed Biodome. To me, they feel like exactly the same thing. These just seem a little bit bigger. I think Park Seed might sell a larger one. I don't have that. But if you didn't have this, you can absolutely just use regular potting mix and just use a small cell tray. I would keep the cells fairly small though, because you don't want too much moisture. Controlling moisture with cuttings is really important. The other thing you're going to need is something to make your holes a little bit bigger. This is my little Sneebor little seed separator thing. It's very extra. You do not need this. A pencil will work great. A bamboo skewer will work great. Something though, because you're going to have to make these holes a little bit bigger so you can easily slide your cuttings in. You're also going to need something very, very sharp to cut with, because the last thing you want to do when you're taking a cutting is to crush the stems on it. I actually just bought a 10-pack of cheap scalpels off of Amazon that I'll use for this purpose. If you have any concerns about disease, change your scalpel. Just use a different scalpel on different varieties. If you need to, they're cheap enough to be able to do that. You don't want to worry about disease. And then this isn't necessarily even a necessity because dahlias tend to root very easily. But since you're going to all this work, you might as well do it anyway, I figure. And that is a little bit of hormone rooting powder or hormone rooting gel. To take the actual cutting, there's actually 3 different methods to do it. And that should make you not nervous. It should make you feel good. Because if there are 3 different ways to do it, that means they probably all work. So pick whichever one you like best or what is most convenient for you. Whichever one you like, they're probably all going to work just fine. If they didn't all work, there wouldn't be 3 different ways to do it. There would just be the one. The first method, so you can see you've got your sprouts. They're popping up from the neck. If they get a little bit low, you can always just kind of gently brush the soil away. The first one we're going to do is called a pull. And that's simply just grasping right at the base here and just kind of gently rocking this back and forth. And this will, you don't want to squeeze, you're just kind of rocking it back and forth to get it to sort of break off from the tuber. And there you go. Now you're left with this cutting. So this is where the process of sort of starting to clean this up a little begins. So this is where I use the scalpel to just kind of clean up that end. And then we also take off some leaves. So I'm going to take off this set of leaves right here. Remember, when you're doing cuttings, when you have a lot of leafy growth, you're trying to get this thing to grow roots, not leaves. So you're sort of sacrificing the leaves. And I'd probably stop there on that one. I like to put my rooting hormone just in the cap or in a separate dish because God forbid you did have a disease on this, you'd transfer that to your whole thing. Now I find that you don't need to do anything more than that. Go into your tray and you're probably going to have to make these holes a little bit bigger with something because what you don't want to do is have to cram this in there real hard. And then you're just going to ease it in. And I like to go almost up to that set of leaves there. So there's more stem to create roots. So let's do one more and I'll do this one just because you can see it better that way. And you just kind of in there. And off it comes. So when you do the pull, you end up with like a little bit of like connection to the tuber there. And we'll talk about that again with one of the next methods we're going to use. So the cleaning up is just to make sure that you don't have like little bits that might basically be on their way to dying and like starting as a rot situation. So that's the whole idea behind sort of cleaning these up. Okay, that guy's good to go. Into the hormone powder. Tap off the excess. Make your hole a little bit bigger. Pop it in. Done. So sometimes you don't really have like a super clear shot at it. Like on this one right here, it's kind of bent around the side. So what you can kind of do is you can just kind of go in there and cut right at the base. Slice that off. End up with your little cutting. And then from there, the process is exactly the same. Take your leaves off. You might want to clean up this end a little bit if it's a little ratty. Clean that up and make a fresh cut. And I might even take off like one of these 2 leaves just so that there are fewer leaves to support. So let's just say we take off this one. And you can also, that's where, you know, your scissors or your scalpel or your really sharp knife, whatever you're using that's really sharp goes. Everything else is exactly the same about the process from here. Now, the last way I want to show you is actually the original way that I was told to do this, which is to take a small sliver of tuber with the cutting. And supposedly that is supposed to help make them grow better. So that way you really need to be able to see that neck, and you're just going to kind of slice actually into that tuber area a little bit. Take a tiny little sliver of that with it. So you can see I've now taken a little bit of tuber, and of course you don't want to cut that off because you just did this cutting intentionally to get that bit. Same deal, I will clean up a couple of leaves on this. Clean up this little bit at the bottom. Into the rooting powder. Tap that real good. If you're doing this into soil, I would want to make sure that that soil is firmed nicely, and then firm the soil back around that. Now you might notice that I've got some other cuttings in here already. I've been taking cuttings here for about a week, I would say, maybe even a week and a half on some of these. This one was definitely a pull, and we don't have any sign of roots on these yet, but you know, everything is looking really good. I haven't had any issues. You want to make sure those leaves stay nice and turgid. If you start seeing leaves wilting or something, then there's an issue going on. Okay, once you have your cuttings in whatever tray you're going to put them in, pop on a humidity dome. Make sure it's tall enough that the material is not touching the top of the dome. That's bad news. So I got this nice tall one. Like I said, it came as part of this kit, but you can find tall humidity domes anywhere. Onto a heat mat under a light, and just watch the humidity. These are not soaking wet. These are thoroughly moistened, but they are not, you know, they're not dripping or anything. And this is probably about right. So just keep an eye on it that way. And then what you're waiting for is to just keep checking them. Once you see roots kind of filling that whole thing, then you can bump those up to probably 4-inch pots. And that's probably as big as I would pot them up to until I planted them out somewhere. These will form tubers that you can save for the following year. They should bloom, they should flower, they should be everything every other dahlia is. They might be a little bit slower getting to flowering than some other ones, but if you start this early enough, they might also be totally fine. They will move pretty quickly, I think. So I hope you can see this is a pretty easy project. Don't stress the little details. Dahlias are very easy to grow from cuttings. So it's a pretty good one if you're not familiar from growing to cuttings. It's actually a pretty good one to start with. And if you have a dahlia that you really love, not a bad idea to get more of it. Thanks for watching. Go do some gardening.